Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and thank you for joining me as always. Another week of the college football season is in the books. Another week of the NFL season concluding tonight with Monday Night Football. And here at Saturday to Sunday, we continue to cover all things NFL draft, NFL draft stocks, coverage wire to wire, checking in on last year's rookies with the NFL Rookie Report, Fantasy Dynasty Report. This week, bringing back the Devy Slant Report to talk about a couple of the underclassmen, non-draft eligible prospects as well. So let's jump right into it for Week 12 of the college football season. Let's kick it off with the NFL Draft Report. As usual, let's start the quarterback position. This week, Carson Beck looked like the prospect that we were expecting to see throughout this season. Even someone like myself who wasn't as high on him as other people still was expecting him to look the way he did this past week. Georgia gets a big win to keep their playoff hopes alive against Tennessee. Carson Beck, 347 yards and 2 touchdowns, also added in a rushing touchdown. He probably looked as calm and collected and played with poise as we've seen throughout the season. Good decision-making, protected the football. Everything we kind of thought we would see week in and week out from Carson Beck, he delivered this week. So if he can string that together down the stretch here, if Georgia can get in the playoffs and play some meaningful football games, I do think there's a chance Carson Beck can improve his draft stock. I'm not going to say one good game jumps him back into the round one mix. I think there's been way more questions that have arisen this year than answers in terms of what I wanted to see from him. So for me, he's still much more of a day 2 type prospect. One good performance. Is there time for him to change the narrative? Yeah. There's still a lot of important potential football games left for some of these prospects. Beck is in that pool of prospects. So we'll see if he can change the narrative here a little bit in terms of his overall draft pedigree leading into draft months after the college football season ends. Speaking of a guy that we're still looking to kind of get back into the early season groove and the hype that entered the season, Quinn Ewers out of Texas. 20 of 32, 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Texas got the win this week, but he did not look like a high caliber prospect in that game. And we've just seen so much up and down since he got injured and Arch Manning came in and then he got the job back once he came. We just have not seen Quinn Ewers take that next step. I thought we were seeing signs of it early in the season. And it's just been an up and down roller coaster for Quinn Ewers this past week. I know the stats are fine with 176 yards and 2 touchdowns and a victory, but it was one of those games that you were kind of expecting Texas to roll. And then they struggled. Ewers really couldn't get a lot going. The pedestrian numbers, not what you expected to see. Unlike Ewers, another prospect who did deliver this week and continues to deliver is Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. 30 of 41, 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, had an interception early in that game, put it right behind him and delivered throughout that game in Colorado's easy, convincing win over Utah. Continue to say what he's done in terms of elevating the team around him, I think speaks volumes about what NFL teams look at in terms of a quarterback that can take a average team and make it better. He's doing that in college football. Does that mean it'll automatically translate to the NFL? No. Will he have a prospect maybe as good as Travis Hunter, a transcendent talent? Possibly not. But nonetheless, it's very impressive what Sanders continues to do week in and week out. I know there's a lot of narrative going out there. Dane Brugler, I think it was him and Nate Tice, put out a podcast late last week. Dane's comment was he's got a B level arm. Listen, I think that is the case. I think when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, there's no physical traits that jump off the page that you would say are A caliber. He's a above average to good athlete. He's not a great athlete. He's got average to above average arm talent in terms of velocity and strength. He doesn't have great arm talent. I do think when you combine the arm talent with the accuracy and the ball placement, I think you start to get a picture of a guy who still can make every throw, quick release, quick delivery, makes up for the lack of maybe top end arm talent. So saying a guy's got a B level arm isn't a bad thing. Like we gotta compare people to other prospects. So like when guys like Josh Allen come around, excuse me, when guys like Josh Allen come around and guys like, Drake Maye come around, yeah, their arm talent is great or, elite, for a guy like Josh Allen. So to say that he's got a B level arm isn't a knock on him. It's the reality of the situation. Not every top end quarterback prospect has an A level arm. Bo Nix, last year's draft class, who we're going to talk about later in the NFL Rookie Report, who's really turned around his rookie season, he would be classified as probably a B level arm, if not worse than that, if we were kind of rating what his overall arm talent is. So I don't think it's a knock when you say Shedeur Sanders has a B level arm. I think it's reality of the situation. Drew Allard this past week, 17 of 19, 247 yards and 3 touchdowns. Penn State rolled. We've talked a lot about Drew Allard. He's a guy very toolsy. A team that maybe passes on a quarterback in round 1, I think will be intrigued with the physical traits in somewhere on day 2 and maybe pull the plug on a guy like Drew Allard. Penn State's going to be in some big moments down the stretch here. Would love to see Allard really play well against a top-level team, maybe play well when Penn State falls behind at some point. So there are things that can continue to change the narrative a little bit about Allard down the stretch of the season. Garrett Nussmeier, who we've talked a lot about this year, I feel like it's been a roller coaster of how great he's looked, then a little bit back to reality, then crescendoing back up. People saying maybe he's got like some Tony Romo skill set to him. And then for some people being QB1 in this class a couple of weeks ago to now crescendoing back down. A lot of inaccuracy, inconsistency, poor decision-making over the last couple of weeks. LSU took a loss this week. Nussmeier was 27 of 47, 260 yards and 1 touchdown. It'll be interesting to see. Does he declare what the rest of this season holds for him? But I think where he was kind of on the peripheral not too long ago of being in the mix to maybe be a top 10 guy, I think now we're looking at that's Shedeur Sanders, that's Cam Ward, and then we'll see about Jalen Milroe. I think he's the one wild card. I don't think there's another round 1 guy in this class at this point. So I think that's kind of how it stands right here, following week 12 of the season. Kate Klunick out of Clemson, I want to bring up him. He's been playing. Last week he had a bad loss and didn't look great, but 27 of 41, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 carries, 41 yards and a touchdown. Another guy came into college very highly regarded. So there's a lot of physical traits that intrigue people about Klubnik's game. He's a guy that could intrigue teams as a developmental prospect somewhere on day 3. If we take this to the running back position, Woody Marks, another really impressive performance, 19 carries, 146 yards. We know he's a great receiver, chipped in with 6 more receptions this past week. The landscape of the running back position has really changed since I think before the season started, where we kind of had Hampton and Ollie Gordon and the Ohio State guys clearly in that like top tier pecking order with Ashton Genty. Well, Genty has kind of distanced himself from the rest. I do feel like that next group of guys has kind of been very murky in terms of who's definitively there. That if you tell me a team looks at Woody Marks and looks at him as a round 3, round 4 running back prospect, top 5, top 6 in this class, I don't think that's crazy. We got Caleb Johnson. I talked a couple weeks ago when I redid my rankings. Caleb Johnson and Woody Marks were crescendoing up. Excuse me, guys. And Nicholas Singleton, Jaden Ott, the Ohio State guys were kind of crescendoing down. So for Woody Marks, I think the stock is rising on Woody Marks. The other guys haven't materialized as well as we would expect to see. And I think now that puts him in a scenario where he could potentially be a top 5 back in this class. DJ Giddens, another guy who I've talked a lot about here. I think he's going to be a guy that I'm clearly higher on than a lot of other people in the industry, but he's up to 1,128 yards, 5 touchdowns, can play in the receiving game as well. This past week, another 133 yards on 14 carries. I really like Giddens. Pencil him in round 4, round 5. We saw guys this year, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, have produced in their rookie seasons being a day 3 running back. DJ Giddens is one of my guys. I'm going to be in on him in that round 4, round 5 range of the NFL draft. He'd be a guy I'd be pounding the table for. I really like his overall game. At the wide receiver position, Tet McMillan, we haven't kind of checked in on him. 6 catches, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. I think he has probably separated himself from Luther Burden. Burden's had a little bit of an up and down statistical year. I still think he's a round 1 pick. I still think he's probably a top 20 pick. But I think Tet McMillan's got a chance to be in that top 7, top 8. I think top 10 for sure. I think the only receiver that could potentially get taken ahead of Tet McMillan is Travis Hunter. And obviously with Hunter, there's, layers there in terms of the two-way playing. But McMillan continues to show you that part T. Higgins, that part Drake London. There's a lot to like about Tet McMillan's game, part Mike Evans. All of that kind of puts together what makes him such a high caliber prospect. Mentioned Luther Burden this past week, 8 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown. I still think he's clearly the 3rd best wide receiver in this class. Before the summer, in the summer before the season started, he might have been right there with McMillan and ahead of Hunter. I just think those guys have separated themselves a little bit in terms of what they bring to the table, making Burden my number 3. That's no knock on him. Still think he's a lock round 1 guy and great after the catch, great overall playmaker. That would be a dynamic weapon to any offense in the NFL. Check in on Mario Williams. We've talked about him a couple times this year out of Tulane. Former Devi Darling, bounced around a lot of schools. But this season, 41 catches for Tulane, 701 yards, 17 yards per catch, a couple touchdowns. I think we're going to see him at either the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl. I like Mario Williams' game. I always have. I feel like this year he's being used a little bit more vertically down the field. You're seeing his after the play ability, after the catch ability. And I think that is going to help his overall draft stock. And then another Devi Darling who I wanted to acknowledge was Antonio Williams out of Clemson this past week. 13 catches, 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This is a guy that not that long ago was considered one of the top Devi wide receiver assets in all of college football. Obviously, his career hasn't been as spectacular as I think many expected when he first got to Clemson. But again, you see that talent that he had, that what made him a big-time recruit, what made him a guy that people looked at as the future round 1 wide receiver pick. And it's great to see him kind of performing this year and having the success he has. And I think he's pushed his way back on the radar for sure as a definitive draft caliber prospect. And if he keeps this up, how high could he climb in the wide receiver ranks? The tight end position, a couple guys who I haven't talked about in a while, wanted to give some love to. Luke Lachey, 24 catches, 209 yards. So the stats are not gaudy. But listen, we've seen Iowa tight ends not put up gaudy stats in college. And then, we've seen him have a lot of success at the NFL level. Luke Lachey is a guy I've kind of been in on for the last couple of years. The size, the frame for Lachey. He can play both ways. He can be a blocker. He can be a receiver. So he's one of those guys that can be a traditional wide tight end, but also get out, attack the seam, be a weapon in the pass game as well, but also hold up at the point of attack with solid play strength, solid blocking skill. So I think he's an interesting guy somewhere in that round 4 to round 6 range. Justin Jolly, I haven't talked about him. 6'3", 235. So he's definitely in that little H-back, move tight end, tweener type role. But 34 catches, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns for the NC State tight end. Jolly is a guy who I think you're going to hear a little bit more potential, if he declares, as a guy that could be a unique kind of offensive weapon, somewhere on day 3 as one of those move tight end H-back types. Top of the tight end board, Ty Warren, who we've been talking a lot about, Tyler Warren, 8 catches, 127 yards and a touchdown, 3 carries for 63 yards. Talk about a guy that is used in a variety of ways. I think we are going to see him and Colston Loveland. I think it's very much up in the air who's going to be tight end 1 in this class. I think there's a real chance both of them are top 40, top 50 prospects. If both of them went round one, I wouldn't be stunned with that. A lot of places where I could see Warren fitting in at the next level as a guy who's got the size and frame to play in line, but could also be a major factor in the passing game. Teams are looking for prospects like that. Mason Taylor, 6 catches, 59 yards. He is locked in for me right now as tight end 3 in this class after, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. And then Oscar Delp, I've been kind of waiting all year to see him kind of emerge. We talked about Carson Beck's good game before, but Oscar Delp, 4 catches, 56 yards, and 2 touchdowns. A little bit of a breakout game for Oscar Delp. We'll see if he can kind of keep the momentum going. And if so, and declares, he could be an intriguing prospect that moves up draft boards for sure. Let's bend this over to a quick Devy Slant report. And really, I just kind of wanted to revisit the quarterbacks that we talked about earlier in the year, right? We talked a lot about Nico from Tennessee. We talked a lot about Dylan Raiola from Nebraska. Obviously, a lot about Arch Manning. So Arch Manning obviously gave the job back to Quinn Ewers when he came back. But all the love that we were giving Dylan Raiola early in the year, we haven't really checked in. We haven't really been doing the Devy Slant report much over the last couple of weeks. The last 5 weeks for Dylan Raiola have really went poorly. And, we're talking 191 yards, 2 interceptions this past week, 14 of 27, 177 yards and 1 interception the week before. The week before that, 152 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. The week before that, 234 yards, 3 interceptions. The week before that, 134 yards and an interception. So we're talking about 4, 5, 6, 8 interceptions, in the last 5 games and only 2 touchdowns. Not that prolific player we saw early in the year. And I think and same thing with Nico, while Tennessee was still highly regarded, Nico was not playing nearly as well as he was earlier in the year for Tennessee, even though Tennessee was finding ways to win. They were relying much more on the ground game of Dylan Sampson. And both these guys are still really talented prospects. They still should be at the very top of most Devy quarterback rankings with Arch and then some of the guys in this year's draft class as well. But I think, again, it puts into perspective, 1, just how hard the quarterback position is. 2, just how much of an up and down roller coaster seasons are, let alone collegiate careers. Like these guys have, Raiola's got 2 more years after this before he's draft eligible. Nico, 1 more full year after this year. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be inconsistencies. And I think it's important to understand that. We want to see development. We want to see growth. We want to see overcoming adversity. And I think, eyes will be on Raiola the rest of this year. And then more importantly, next year. Eyes will really be on Nico the rest of this year if Tennessee's in any significant games. But then next year when he is draft eligible, all eyes will be on him. He will go into the season, him and Arch, as probably the clear top 2 quarterback prospects for the 2026 NFL draft. So with that said, yeah, there's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. We saw it with Trevor Lawrence at times in college. We saw it with Caleb Williams at times in college. We saw it with Drake Maye at times in college. There's going to be ups and downs. It's part of the process. Teams are trying to figure them out. There's more film on Raiola now. There's more film on Nico. And defensive coordinators are adjusting their game plan to try to stop them. And I think it's just normal for some of these ups and downs as teams have more film on them. They now got to respond and develop and expand their game to continue to have success and show the development and refinement and growth that we want in terms of top caliber college quarterback prospects transitioning to the NFL. Let's spin this over to the Sunday aspect of Saturday Sunday, which is the NFL Rookie Report. Checking in on the 2024 rookie class. Every single week, there seems to be a lot to talk about the quarterbacks. And I kind of mentioned them before, but, I was at the forefront early in the year talking about how poor Bo Nix was and a lot of my concerns in terms of his evaluation coming into the league kind of came to the forefront. But with that said, as I just talked about, just in the NFL too, and I said like a month or 2 ago, I hope I'm wrong. And I hope that, he starts to show more growth and development and starts to look more like the player we saw at Oregon. And that's exactly what Bo Nix has done in the last month or so. And this past week, it kind of, reached its highest level with Denver and Bo Nix, 28 of 33, 307 yards and 4 touchdowns. Denver rolls over Atlanta with a blowout victory. He's up to almost 2,300 yards now, 14 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 66 completion percentage. He's got Denver at 6-5, and he has now squarely put himself in the mix with Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year. And a couple weeks ago, it looked like it was a runaway for Jaden Daniels. Bo Nix has now made it a 2-man race. If Denver finds their way to 10 wins and he continues to play like this, he's right there in the mix. And I think, listen, we said it on draft night. We said it many times after draft night. There was no marriage better than a Sean Payton offense with a prospect like Bo Nix in terms of getting the most out of his skill set. And it took a little bit of time. But he has found his rhythm, he's found his comfort zone, and he has looked really, really solid for Denver. And it's great to see, right? We need young quarterback prospects who find their way to transitioning successfully. We see so often so many of them fail and don't reach their talent. So hopefully Bo Nix, with the tutelage of Sean Payton, with the offense, with that scheme, continues to build upon this, because he's looked really, really strong in the last couple of weeks, completely in command of the offense, not rattled. He had tons of college experience. I think we're seeing that come to the forefront right now with how good he's looked over the last month plus or so for Denver. Jaden Daniels probably had one of his worst games of the season. Washington lost to Philadelphia last Thursday night. 191 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interceptions. Right now, he's just not running a lot. Like, it could be the rib injury from a couple weeks back, but right now he's a little tentative in terms of that, and that's the running component. While he can win from the pocket, while he's a good thrower, the running component really adds a totally different dynamic to his overall skill set. And if he's not utilizing that right now, I think that hinders his overall upside that we see from week to week. And let's not lose sight that Washington has been a nice story this year. They're still pretty devoid of talent on that roster. They need more playmakers. They need better O-line. There's a lot of aspects of that roster that still need a lot of improvement. And what Daniels has already done this year has been really impressive with the supporting cast around him. But there's definitely been a little down lately. We'll see how he finishes the year. Has he opened the door for Bo Nix to potentially steal the Rookie of the Year? Caleb Williams, obviously new offensive coordinator in Chicago. Caleb Williams had his best game in a couple weeks. No touchdowns, but looked more in command. Used his legs a lot more. 9 carries. 9 carries, 70 yards. I think that's got to be more of Caleb Williams' game, to be honest with you. I think he's got to utilize that skill set. And if something's not there, he is a very good athlete. And I think he's got to get on the run a little bit more, kind of get him going a little bit that way. But the Bears offense did look a little bit more functional this week. So hopefully the OC change kind of helps him finish the season out strong. And then obviously Chicago will be looking to get a head coach in there that really, caters to Caleb Williams' skill set, builds an offense for him. Hopefully it's an offensive-minded head coach. And we see the best of Caleb Williams the rest of this year, and more importantly, moving forward next year and beyond. And then Drake Maye, 30 of 40, 282 yards, 70 yards rushing. 27 yards rushing. Leads New England this past week to a really competitive game against the Rams. I'm so impressed with how good Drake Maye has looked. His overall skill set. People were so worried that the lack of talent in New England was going to hinder him, was going to hold him back, was going to ruin him. And it's literally been the complete opposite. He has been a jolt of energy to his team, to that franchise. And now I think you start to see light at the end of the tunnel if you're a Patriots fan, that we got our guy. Now this offseason is about building around him. Go get him an alpha wide receiver, whether it's C. Higgins in free agency if he hits the market, whether it's really a trade. We see big wide receivers get traded all the time in the NFL, or at the top of round 1 or top of round 2. New England's got to go get him an alpha wide receiver and build up that O-line in free agency in the draft as well. And they really could have something special there with Drake Maye. I was on record last year saying, to me, those three, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Drake Maye, were very close together. I had J.J. McCarthy in the next tier with Michael Penix and Bo Nix. But all three of them, Maye, Daniels, and Williams, I didn't think there was a lot separating them. Anyone who's a longtime listener to the show knows that I wanted the Giants to be aggressive and go up and get Drake Maye. He was my guy last year. Love to see the success that he's had early in his career, and I think New England's going to be really lucky they didn't pull the trigger. I know teams like the Giants and other teams were trying to trade up to get Drake Maye. New England's going to be very happy that they never made that trade because I think they got their guy for the long haul there in Drake Maye. Take it to the running back position. Audric Estime, we were so excited after last week. It looked like he had kind of taken the lead role for Denver. This week, right back to Javonte Williams. Estime, very small, limited role, 6 carries, 16 yards. Again, maybe these ups and downs, you could, I think, maybe potentially use it as a buy now window. I think Estime is going to have a real chance to be the lead guy there for Denver next year. We've seen that prototype have a lot of success for Sean Payton offenses, and I still think people are not that into Estime that you maybe can get him for a late second round rookie pick or even a third round rookie pick or something else, or maybe a veteran if you're a team in the rebuilding. So I definitely keep checking in on the Audric Estime owners, and maybe after a down week like this where it looked like it shifted back to Javonte Williams, his stock's a little bit lower. Maybe you can kind of go get him and the price would be a little bit lower. Jalen Wright, I'd be my strong recommendation would go to buy him now. Right, Raheem Mostert's still getting some work, but you're starting to kind of pivot away from him. I don't think he's going to be on the roster next year. I think next year you're going to have A-Chain, but A-Chain's never going to be a guy who gets 25 touches a week or consistently, right? He's probably best in that 16 to 18 range. Well, I think that opens up for another running back to be very good in that offense as well. Very similar to like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? There's plenty to go around there. I think Wright could be the running mate locked in with A-Chain next year. I think people have a very hard time when there's one great running back on the roster to want the second guy, and especially right now with Mostert still there. I think Wright would be another guy to be looking to very aggressively buy now because I think by the time the offseason rolls around, his stock will go up when they get rid of most there. And people are like, yeah, Wright's going to get a real chance here to be a significant part of that. So I try to get him right now. At the wide receiver position, Rome Odunze looks like he's starting to emerge as the alpha there, which is stunning with how good DJ Moore had been the last couple of weeks. But Rome is definitely being more involved and just a more diverse wide receiver than a guy like DJ Moore in terms of he can win at pretty much every route running, down the field, at the catch point. So as Caleb Williams continues to grow, I think DJ Moore can still be a very good receiver. I think, Rome Odunze has a chance to be a great receiver. So I think we're starting to see the tides turn a little bit with his involvement and his usage. Great to see. Ladd McConkey, 6 catches, 123 yards, continues to be heavily involved there. I do think at some point they might look to get a true number 1 wide receiver there, which would push Ladd down. But I think that's okay. Like I don't think Ladd McConkey ever profiled as a alpha number 1 wide receiver. I think he'd have heavy volume, heavy targets, but I think playing alongside another great receiver, if they were to get one, would do wonders for Ladd McConkey. Knowing Jim Harbaugh, I don't think he's going to be heavily involved in the free agent market. I don't think he's going to use a early pick on a wide receiver in round 1. So I think they're going to piecemeal together, which could leave Ladd McConkey in the lead role there, even though I think he might be best suited as a really strong number 2. Ricky Pearsall didn't do much this past week, but I wanted to bring him up because I do think overall, and I was big into Ricky Pearsall, and I still like the player a lot, but San Francisco is such a unique place. When people drafted Ricky Pearsall for their dynasty leagues, I think most people thought Brandon Ayuk was gone. And if Brandon Ayuk was going to stay, Debo is definitely gone. And that still could happen. They still have Kittle. They still have McCaffrey for a period of time. What I don't think anybody saw happening was Juwan Jennings turning it into a legit, really good wide receiver. If that's the case, where's that leave Ricky Pearsall? If they keep Debo, it leaves him as the 4th wide receiver, and then you still have Kittle and McCaffrey. If they trade Debo, well, then you still have potentially, Juwan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk coming back from injury. Okay, maybe Pearsall's the number 3 wide receiver, but you still have McCaffrey and Kittle. So I do have some long-term concerns about Ricky Pearsall, especially with the emergence of Juwan Jennings. And what more is there to say about Brock Bowers? 13 catches, 126 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's tight end 1 for the rest of the year. Redraft, he's tight end 1 in every dynasty league. He has separated himself far from the pack over the rest of the guys in dynasty, whether it's Kincaid, Laporta, Pitts, the veteran guys like Kelsey and Andrews, and it's so far separated now. McBride's the only one that I would say it's Bowers, a little break, McBride, a little break, and then the rest of those guys come. And that's kind of how the tight end landscape. And let's conclude the night with a quick fantasy dynasty report. Stock up on Justin Herbert. We were so worried about the run first aspect of Jim Harbaugh, and it's still a little bit of an issue, but we're seeing the best of Justin Herbert. We're seeing him emerge into an elite quarterback. We knew he had elite traits, but there was a lot of up and down. Some of that not due to him, due to circumstances around him. Some of it was due to him. Jim Harbaugh's turning him into a great quarterback. And if he turns himself into a great quarterback, I think the fantasy stats will inevitably come to be a good fantasy quarterback. Maybe it kind of reaches like a quarterback 8 to 10 overall, maybe, and not, top 6, top 5 because of the volume. But I do think he can still emerge as a QB1 in dynasty circles at the quarterback position, especially as they continue to build up that offense around them. Anthony Richardson back in the mix this past week, looked great. The rushing, the throwing, that's the guy we thought we were going to see this year. I continue to say when he gets going on the ground, I think he has a better passing game. He looks better in rhythm. That was a good first game back for Anthony Richardson. They got to keep him going on the ground. That's got to be a focal point. And then the other stuff kind of comes along still. Glad to see him back under the helm. He never should have lost his job. That made no sense for the Colts and the team they have right now. Hopefully Richardson finishes the year strong. If somebody in your league, you still have reservations about Richardson because of the benching, and maybe I'd still go aggressively buy him. I think he's too talented of a player. He's going to get a lot of opportunities. He's got the cheat code in terms of the running ability. He's a great red zone runner. He's going to get touchdowns. A lot to like about him. At the wide receiver position, stock up on Chase Brown. I don't know. I'm sure the Bengals will invest in a running back in the offseason, but it could easily be a round 3, round 4, round 5 guy. Chase Brown has shown he can handle a heavy workload. We're seeing him get more involved in the pass game. I think Chase Brown's going to be the guy that they look at as a cheap guy. They'll add somebody with him for sure to replace Zach Moss, I'm sure, next year. But there's a lot to like about Chase Brown. He'd be a guy probably in top 20, top 24s of dynasty running back rankings right now as we go to the home stretch of the NFL season. Stock up on him. Listen, I don't know how you say stock. You don't say stock up on Saquon Barkley. He looks unbelievable. We look at running backs in dynasty in 2-year windows. There's no reason why Saquon Barkley for another 2 years can't be one of the top running backs in all of dynasty in football, in fantasy football. We've seen what Derrick Henry's done this year. We've seen what Joe Mixon has done this year, resurging back, right? Saquon Barkley on a great team, great O-line, rushing quarterback, great pass catchers. If he stays healthy, I don't see a scenario where he's not a top 5, top 6 back, probably for another year or two after this. I think he's got to be very high in running back rankings for dynasty as well. And at the wide receiver position, stock down on Jalen Waddle, continues to struggle. I also think stock down a little bit on Devonta Smith. We haven't had that conversation, and I think we need to, because with Saquon there, with the running capabilities of Jalen Hurts, with the dominance of A.J. Brown, where does that leave Devonta Smith? Because if you looked at dynasty rankings prior to the season, he was really, really high. I'm just not sure there's enough passing volume to make him a great fantasy asset with A.J. Brown, a running quarterback, and now an elite running back there as well. If somebody still values him like anywhere near where he was being valued before the season started, I think I'd make the trade and get out from him, because I just don't think with Jalen Hurts and the type of quarterback he is, we're going to see that high-end production week in and week out. We're going to see a lot of inconsistencies. A.J. Brown is going to be the guy that's more consistent. And yeah, there'll be some weeks that Devonta Smith spikes, but for where he was in rankings, he was ranked more as a guy who you didn't expect to have some of those inconsistencies. And we've seen a lot of them this year. Only 41 catches, 516 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then stock up on Josh Downs. I've talked about him a lot. I know I had some concerns about Anthony Richardson getting back in the helm. But every time I watch the Colts play, he looks like the best receiver on the field. Better than Michael Pittman. More separation. I know he's a smaller guy, but since the draft circuit, I've talked about it, he can win vertically down the field. He's not a slot-only guy. He's got the body type. He plays bigger than he is. He's physical. He can win at the catch point. He's got great ball skills, body control, can adjust. For a smaller guy, he can get vertical. You could do a lot of different things with him. Josh Downs would be the Colts receiver that I'd run on my team in terms of dynasty moving forward. I think with the highest potential upside there week in and week out. So there it is, guys, a quick fantasy dynasty report for this week. So hopefully you enjoyed the NFL rookie report, fantasy dynasty report, and then on the college side, NFL draft report, Devy Slant report as well. Sorry, I'm battling a little bit of a cold. Tried to minimize the coughing, tried to mute myself a little bit, but a little tough when you're running solo here to do that. If you're enjoying this content, please get over to the website, SS Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out the premium content tab, and for $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. You get the scouting notebook, so many detailed player profiles in there, strengths, functional areas, developmental areas, how they win, NFL role, NFL draft projection, so many updates to come on that. Tons of prospects will be added in the pre-draft months as well. You get the rankings notebook, all our different rankings in there, draft eligible, dynasty rookie rankings after the draft. We have our tiered rankings closer to the draft as well. We have our positional overall dynasty rankings for fantasy. We have our Devy rankings in there, a lot of things in there. And then in April, you get the draft projections notebook, tabs for every position, offense and defense, over 400 prospects in there, snapshot of how they win, their combine measurements, their combine testing, ranked in order of how we expect them to come off the board on draft weekend. Not our rankings, not what we would do, but gathering everything we've heard out there and putting them in the order in which we expect them to come off the board. A tab for every a tab for the 32 guys we expect to come off the board in round 1, top 100 prospects we expect to come off the board in rounds 1 through 3, and then our projection around of every prospect to be picked, usually around 255, a big board for that in terms of who we expect to come off the board. We've had a lot of success in our draft projections notebook over the years. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.